All right, so we just did a connectivity test, but can you hear me again? Want to make sure? Okay, awesome. Well, then let's jump right into the debate. So the debate, I think, is pretty self-explanatory in terms of what it is we're going to be debating. The Me Too movement, we understand to be the movement that uses a hashtag to encourage sexual assault victims to speak out about sexual assault. It's something that's been in the news a lot lately, so I would find it curious if you didn't know what it was, if most of you didn't know what it was. There's two sides of this resolution that are going to be the point of contention. The first is what does is the Me Too movement something that's necessary, and the second is the Me Too movement beneficial. Necessary means needed in light of outstanding circumstances, and beneficial means it's done good. So in light of this, I'm going to be having two main arguments. The first one is that the Me Too movement is necessary, and the second is that the Me Too movement is beneficial. So it's pretty straightforward, pretty self-explanatory. The first one is that it's necessary. Specifically, I'm going to be arguing that the Me Too movement is necessary because of injustice. A number of national studies from the Department of Justice, from the National Council, who worked in conjunction with the Department of Justice, affirm that sexual assaults have been and continue to be grossly underreported. A number of reasons exist for this. Chief among those reasons, statistically, that they've found is that victims are often either A, intimidated into silence, or B, feared that they won't be believed and supported. This means that the Me Too movement is necessary because there exists a problem. That problem is twofold. The first is that there is injustice, there's sexual assault that exists. And secondly, that injustice isn't getting solved or prevented because women or sexual assault victims in general don't feel like they can actually speak out because they either won't be believed or there won't be a support system that exists that will help solve their problems. Another reason cited was that people would often believe the person that's more powerful rather than the person that was the victim. So we understand why the Me Too movement is necessary. It's necessary because they're underreported and because there isn't a system in place that allows victims to speak about the assault. The second thing is it's actually beneficial. It's beneficial for three key reasons. The first one is that it encourages speaking out. If you look on Twitter and you see how many times the hashtag has been used, the Me Too movement allows people to come forward and say, hey, you used to not be supported in this. Now there's a support system that exists for you to speak out about assaults that have happened. This has two impacts. The first impact is that it brings justice to the people that were guilty of the particular assault, whatever it was, by punishing them, by allowing people to distance themselves from them, by them losing their jobs, etc. And the second thing is it protects other potential victims. When you allow people, and I'll cite a couple different examples, like Harvey Weinstein, Larry Nassar, Brett Ratner, or Matt Lauer, to continue to get away without receiving some sort of punishment or protection, you allow a consistent thread of abuse to continue to happen and sexual assault to happen. So it's beneficial because it encourages speaking out, it brings justice to those who are guilty, and it protects other potential victims. So I think my case is pretty straightforward. With that, I'll go ahead and pass the mic.
Okay. So I know you said it was kind of obvious, but just for layman's terms, what to define the Me Too movement, it's a phenomenon essentially which is a hashtag that is people are doing to help demonstrate the widespread prevalence of sexual assault, harassment, and or rape within the workplace. With that definition in order, I'm going to go against the resolution in two ways. One is that the resolution, in theory, was beneficial up to a point. But, however, it's no longer beneficial because at the current state, as of January 16th, 2018, the Me Too movement, the advocates that are pushing it, have advocated for changing the judicial standard within the United States and Europe, as well as abroad. It's changing the presumption of innocence. This is a fundamental right that goes back to English common law. It actually goes all the way back to ancient Rome. And despite what kind of trial it is, the presumption of innocence before being able to proceed with the trial or proceed by assuming someone's guilt is necessary. Because my second point is that the people that want to use this for nefarious reasons without the presumption of innocence will take this to hijack the movement from actual sexual assault victims for people that are looking to cause a stir. I can just point towards the Duke Lacrosse case a few years back. The presumption of innocence was essentially second nature in that case. What turned out to be judicial malpractice from the prosecutor had 3 innocent victims that had their lives ruined. For more recent example, we can go back to Louisville, where there was alleged gang rape. Turns out there wasn't even a party. Turns out that the girl that in question wasn't at the party in question. well, the problem with these cases is that they take away from the legitimacy of actual rape victims. So it's important to actually assess these claims individually at a time and ensure that the people that are doing these wrongdoings are punished accordingly. And with that, I'll pass it back.
There's a couple different arguments that are there. I want to try to categorize them as best I can so we can stay organized. The first argument is that the Me Too movement wants to make a change in the criminal justice system. I disagree with this. I don't think the movement is one that uniformly says that. There may have been individuals who have called for changes in the criminal justice system based on possible judicial malpractice that exists, but the movement itself doesn't say there is a problem with how sexual assaults are handled in the justice system. It says that people don't have a system or a support system that allows them to come forward, meaning we don't know about accused cases. And the second argument under this is the false accusations, but I'll get to that in a second. There's a little bit of connection between the two arguments, so I'm going to try to be as organized as possible. So on the first one, I don't think there's a centralized large group of people that's saying we need to change the justice system so that anyone who is accused is automatically put in prison. There's not a single person that said that I've observed. If you have like a centralized Me Too clan that is saying, "Hey, we need to just need to make the justice system so that if you are accused, you're thrown in jail." If you have that, that's great, but I don't think that's the case. The second argument is on false accusations. There's a couple different responses to this. The first one is that, and you basically say that, well, false accusations are bad because people get punished who are guilty. Yes, I agree. All that this proves is that we need a system to vet complaints, not that the movement that encourages women to make accusations is bad. There's a distinction here. Me Too does not say we should throw people in prison. Me Too establishes a system that allows people to come forward and make accusations. Other people are allowed to make their judgments about that. But sure, I can agree that we may need a system to vet those complaints, but that doesn't mean that the complaints or the encouragement of those statements are bad. Secondly, this is going to be so outweighed. My question for you is, how many examples do you have of the Me Too movement falsely accusing somebody? And then how many examples are there of women who are actually legitimately raped or sexually assaulted in some way that the men were there? So, I mean, there's way more on my side of the resolution than there are on yours. And then my last response to this is that the court of public opinion is something that exists, right? The Me Too movement isn't saying let's punish people on a criminal level. Sure, I can agree with you that the court of public opinion may be crucifying people preemptively. I can even agree with you, but the problem is this: that's not unique to my side. The court of public opinion has existed and ruled in the past. The difference is that in the past, it just never believed the victim, or at least it never believed the person, that wasn't as powerful. It always believed the person that was more powerful and the person that had more money, more legitimacy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is why so many women or people who are victims of sexual assault are scared to come forward, because they have seen the past, and in the past, they're instantly discredited and instantly ruined. There's a million instances of this happening. So no, I don't think people are advocating for what you think they're advocating. And the false accusations just mean we need a better system to vet accusations, not that we need to discourage discussion about sexual assault.
Okay, just to make sure we're working on the same premise, I'm going to ask you a question. Is listen and believe a central point that the majority of the Me Too movement is advocating for? Yes or no?
Is listen and believe was what you said? Meaning just believe everything that you hear? Clarify your question.
Okay, well, I'm not sure if it's a pretty mainstay of the Me Too movement. I'm sure you've seen it all over the media, that they say that it's time to listen and believe. Listen and believe is the mainstay of the hashtag. It came into I guess you could say, public domain because there was a controversy between what you're saying. People are being discredited falsely, and they have to push back against being discredited falsely, right? As soon as they come out, they're lambasted. That's bad. So it's the feminist movement or the societies abroad that pushes the Me Too movement, the advocates, would you not agree, are saying listen and believe?
I think generally the movement says that you should believe people who say they've been raped.
Okay, well, when you say listen and believe, what that is it's no longer a presumption of innocence; it's a presumption of guilt, like by its very nature. I mean, we can hash that out if you like. Now, I'm not saying that there are false accusations. I'm saying there's way more. I'm sure there are way more legitimate ones than non-legitimate ones. The point of me pointing this out is that the court of public opinion. The court of public opinion is instead pushing this new movement, which is saying, okay, guys, as soon as we have accusations, action needs to be taken. I'm not sure if you've seen, but Matt Damon himself just commented on the hashtag, and there was a public petition for Ocean's 13 for him to be completely removed from the film. What did he do? All he did was say, we need to stop conflating rapes from sexual harassment. Both are bad, but they're not in the same category. And we need to give proper attention to those with the most serious accusations. From that alone, he was considered to be a rape apologist, and there was petitions to push him out of the movie. Now he's been financially punished for that. That financial punishment is the court of public opinion adopting guilty until proven innocent. And that's all I'm pointing out. Yeah, I'll pass that because he said he wanted to say something.
Okay, so I mean, and I don't know if you missed the response that I made in my last speech, but my response to this is very simple. The Me Too movement isn't pushing anything unique about believing people. The Me Too movement is encouraging instances to be spoken about. The court of public opinion, and you and I can probably both agree on this, has existed and will continue to exist, regardless of the Me Too movement. Like in the past, if a girl was raped and she accused a dude, a very public person of rape, I don't know who it is you want to talk about. A political candidate of rape, the court of public opinion ruled one way or the other. Okay, like it wasn't like the court of public opinion has said, oh well, we just never believe anyone. Like the court of public opinion has always said, listen and believe. It just has been discriminatory about who it listens and believes to. This is why we make a distinction between the court of public opinion and the actual criminal justice system, right? So my argument is very simple. The Me Too movement isn't pushing anything unique about presumption of guilt. The Me Too movement is pushing something about allowing women who have been suppressed, whose voices have been suppressed, to speak out so we can deal with those cases. Yes, generally speaking, if somebody comes to you that you know and confides in you and says, I was a victim of sexual assault or of rape or something, you shouldn't be like, well, I'm not going to believe you unless you can prove it, right? I'm not saying that we shouldn't conduct some sort of investigation, but the listen and believe idea exists so that women aren't scared of being, instantly shut down and instantly rejected. So I'll make this distinction. The court of public opinion has existed and will always exist. The Me Too movement doesn't make any changes to the court of public opinion. It just allows sexual assault victims to speak out and make their cases known.
Okay, well, I maintain that it is actually changing the legal standards being advocated for lobbying within organizations across the board. And now you can have an anonymous accusation, and that anonymous accusation alone is enough for that person to be suspended with an anonymous accusation. Now, you mentioned some real cases, legitimate cases that seem to have corroborated evidence, and then I'm not questioning those. But there's now countless cases said that you're not hearing about because the legal standard is changing within colleges. I can give you the Louisville example of how the court of public opinion has advocated for colleges to change their policy. In fact, the Obama administration themselves, his Justice Department, said you need to change the legal standard from presumption of innocence to the preponderance of evidence. Well, that change by itself had a ripple effect across the society at large. And so we have cases like Louisville last year where there was a fictitious case of rape where people were suspended. The fraternity was erased and lost its funding, and the people that were at the fraternity were actually assaulted from people on the outside. Now, this is the only reason I'm pointing out this one example is because the presumption of innocence would have prevented this. If you said, okay, we're going to investigate this. Right? If people said we are going to withhold judgment until these things are investigated before these alleged perpetrators are put into the public domain. If you have somebody that says wants to ruin somebody's life, all they have to do is say this person has sexually assaulted me or sexually assaulted somebody. That person has no way of defending themselves, and since the court of public opinion has already dictated who's innocent and who's guilty, it's not a question of are they going to be criminally prosecuted. Their life is ruined before any criminal prosecution is even able to take place.
And I agree. And I think that a lot of women who have been the victim of rape or sexual assault have had their life ruined because they haven't been able to be put in a position where they've been able to believe. And this has happened for the last 50 years, right? Like there's countless examples of women who have come forward in the past and have been disbelieved, their lives have been destroyed, and the person that raped or sexually assaulted them got off scot-free. So like don't pretend like, oh well, there hasn't been any sexual assault that's been a problem. And now all of a sudden, since we've done such a great job on sexual assault, now all of a sudden there's just lots of false accusations that are flying around, and it's leading to a lot of innocent people that are being punished by the court of public opinion. So before I look at the public opinion argument and the distinction that I was making earlier, I want to take you back to the two responses I made earlier before that aren't addressed so far. The first one is that you have not given me a single example of an innocent person that's been falsely accused since the Me Too movement has actually started. And secondly, there's a bajillion examples that I gave you, specifically 5 or 6. There's a bajillion examples all over the news of women whose stories are pretty corroborated, people who have admitted guilt in certain instances, and people that were actually sexual assaultists and rapists that without the Me Too movement wouldn't have been brought to the light, right? So right from the get-go, remember, we're not talking about are false accusations a good or bad thing. We're talking about the Me Too movement specifically. And two things. Is it necessary? Yes, we know it's necessary because there's injustice that exists. And is it beneficial? Yes, we know it's beneficial because it's brought to light a bunch of sexual assaults. I'll pass the mic.
Okay, well, there's 2 points. The first is you've asked me to actually prove a negative, right? Can you actually prove that somebody's claim is false? Okay, now I said that takes an investigation. Again, it's a fallacy to actually say, okay, somebody makes a claim, and now that claim is made, I need to now prove that claim is false. That's insane. That's why we have standards. That's why we have a philosophical underpinning in Western civilization for people that are accused of anything to be presumed innocent until they are proven to be guilty. Until evidence is pointed out. Until evidence is pointed that they are guilty, I'm saying I withhold judgment. Now, I said, if you can say that I can prove somebody to be innocent, that's a fallacy. So I can't do that. Well, you have one more question, and I do want to get to it. So please ask it again. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's all good. I'll briefly address that. Like, obviously, I'm not saying that we should just believe anybody. We should just throw people in prison based on an accusation. Remember, the criminal justice system has much higher standards than the quote unquote court of public opinion, and that's because the court of public opinion isn't regulated. Like, we can't be like, we can't just control what other people are going to think. All we can control is whether or not people are heard, right? So the difference between pre-Me Too movement is that sexual assault victims and rapists, or sexual assault victims stay quiet and rapists get away with it. Post-Me Too, we have accusations and cases brought to light, and people can make opinions and people can make judgments on those things. Now, whether or not those judgments are proper and correct, whether or not the judgments get it right is one issue. But we can't disagree that the court of public opinion is going to happen one way or the other. And what I'm going to say, and my argument, is that it's much better for the people that have been sexually assaulted and raped to be able to feel like they can come forward and allow the court of public opinion to quote unquote judge the case. But remember, let's grant you this argument for a second. Let's grant you that that the court of public opinion is just believing everybody, and we are pushing for a change. The reality is you haven't given me a single example post-Me Too movement of somebody who's been falsely accused. And all the examples that we've seen so far have been legitimately corroborated, most of them by dozens of other people who are also victims. So, like, you can't deny two things. You can't deny that it's necessary, that there's sexual assault that goes underreported. You haven't contested this. You also can't deny that the Me Too movement has successfully taken down people who were rapists and sexual assault victims. And you also can't deny that it's encouraged women who were sexual assaulted and who were raped to come forward and speak. So what we're left with is, we know it's necessary because it's injustice, and we know it's done good because it's promoted justice and allowed women to be protected and also to feel like they can speak out. And on your side of the resolution, we don't have any negatives. We have a potential negative where, oh, well, maybe somebody could come along and be falsely accused. And you're totally right. We absolutely can come. We absolutely have somebody that does that. But it's far better for us to actually have everything brought forward and come to light, rather than keep an entire an entire group of people, specifically sexual assault victims, shut out and shut down. And the court of public opinion is going to rule one way or the other. I think it's better to have all the facts laid out. I'll go ahead and pass the mic.
And once again, you're asking me to prove that somebody made a false rape accusation. Again, that's putting the burden of proof on, again, on the negative. That's not possible. That's like you telling me to do that is a great talking point, but it is a fallacy. I cannot prove a negative. And said I can only point out that the ones that I said it's more likely than not that the ones that we see in public domain are more likely to be true than not. I said especially with ones that are corroborating evidence. However, I said this isn't just a hypothetical. The legal standards for college campuses across the United States have changed, and the Me Too movement is reflecting this change and the legal standards from the Justice Department. Now, the Obama Justice Department put this precedent in order years ago. When they said they changed from the presumption of innocence to make an investigation towards the preponderance of evidence, and therefore there were hundreds of students that were suspended from an accusation alone without being able to confront the witness, even after the witness has come out and said that they were lying. The person is unable to be reinstated. This is just a fact of what happens when you change that standard. So I'm not advocating that there isn't people that need to that have been sexually assaulted and and had difficulty coming out, especially when you have cultures such as Hollywood. That is not in debate. That culture needs to be addressed. And the Me Too movement, they said, was beneficial when addressing that specific incident, right? That the whole culture of sexual assault and sexual harassment. So when you look at it in the wider society, when you look at the United States as a whole, you can. It said the Me Too movement has advocated to look at all instances of sexual harassment, any allegation of sexual harassment, sexual assault, and said or sexual misconduct within the workplace, to have the company or school take action before investigations are completed. That's just the fact of the case that we have today. And it said, and the repercussions for that, I said, go against 2,000 years of Roman law. It said the English common law, the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th Amendments in the United States Constitution. And they go further than just criminal court cases. They go from the court of public opinion is changing the society's perspective of how to handle an accusation made anonymously. And I said, and that I think is no longer beneficial and no longer necessary. So it went from a necessary problem from specific industries within Hollywood, where people were being sexually assaulted and raped, and then everyone big was covering it up. That was a cultural problem that needed to be identified. I said it's no longer beneficial when the legal standard has changed.
Okay, so first of all, on this notion that like all sexual assault is already solved for and therefore it's no longer necessary, I think this is ridiculous. Literally yesterday, 2 individuals, one of them was Simone Biles, the gymnast, came forward and used the Me Too hashtag to talk about a sexual assault that had happened. Today there have been something like 20 other examples. I'm sure 100 examples on Twitter that exist. So saying that like the Me Too movement was good but is no longer necessary forgets that the Me Too movement literally is just a movement that encourages women to speak about their sexual assaults. So my response is, as long as sexual assaults happen, the Me Too movement will be necessary and beneficial. Okay, so a couple different arguments that you make. The first thing is on this, like, it's fallacious for me to ask you to prove a negative and that you can't prove a negative. My response is it's not a fallacy for you to have to prove your side of the resolution. You're saying that there are false accusations that exist as a result of the Me Too movement. That's your claim. I'm saying you haven't given me a single example of where the Me Too movement has done any harm. Your examples that you've given so far have been all pre-Me Too movement, including the college standards one, which are from the Obama era. Guess what? Me Too wasn't around in the Obama era. Neither was Louisville. Neither was the other one that you gave, like Duke something. I can't remember the name. Again, you haven't given me a single example of where the Me Too movement has actually caused anybody who's innocent to be falsely accused, meaning the Me Too movement has literally done zero harm. All your examples are from other areas. The last argument was the legal standards in college. My first response is that Me Too is post-Obama. The college standards is Obama era. Secondly, the standards of colleges aren't the subject of the debate. We aren't talking about what college institutions do and how they handle sexual assault. We're talking about the Me Too movement specifically. And thirdly is nobody's saying that we change the justice system. We're saying that we should bring more cases to the criminal justice system and encourage women to speak out. So I've handled all those. I handled all those. You haven't still addressed my specific case that legitimately has proven that it's been beneficial and legitimately has proven that it's been necessary. You haven't. You've actually conceded them in your last speech. You said, yeah, Hollywood was really. It was really good that we exposed it in Hollywood. So you have no net harm from the Me Too movement. Just a lot of isolated examples from the previous 10 years before the Me Too movement. Not any post Me Too movement. Not any caused by the Me Too movement. Yet we have specific, unique benefits that the Me Too movement have given us. And I'll go ahead and pass the mic and let you clarify these things.
Okay. Just really quickly. First, you're asking me again to prove a negative and then saying, well, the resolution asks you to prove a negative. So the resolution is asking me to do something that's impossible. So I guess then I lose by default. All right. I guess that's the argument first. No, the argument is actually a statement of fact, and you're arguing in favor of the resolution, and being in favor of the resolution points out that, as it points out two things. You have to argue that it's both necessary and beneficial. You've argued that case. And I said here's where it was. I said it was necessary and it was beneficial to a point. I now given to a point where it's no longer beneficial. Then it's crossed the line, and now it's not hypothetical. It's not hypothetical. The Me Too movement as a whole has had, it's like if you look at if you look at false rape accusations, if I can give you one if you'd like. There was a black host. I'm just trying to remember his name. A black host on CBS. His name will come to me. He was given. He had 3 anonymous accusations against him, and he was terminated without any notice. He's come on and the television on other stations, and he said he doesn't know what he's accused of. He doesn't know who the people that are accusing him of, and he has no recourse to be able to investigate what is being charged against him. And he was terminated because of the social media pressure to terminate his employment. Now, that's a real example that occurred from a famous person. The ones that you don't see are the ones that I said are incalculable. When you change the legal standard, the people that are going to be harmed the most are the people that have the least amount of resources to defend themselves. So the people that have the least amount of resources to defend themselves have the least amount of media coverage. Having the least amount of media coverage means that they have the least exposure to their defense. People are going to be terminated without recourse, and you won't hear about them. This isn't hypothetical. I said this is the very nature when you change the legal standard. About the Obama administrations and going back and saying this isn't the resolution. No, that is correct. It's not the resolution. I said the precedent was stated with the Obama administration. I said the Me Too movement has now advocated for adopting it across the board from all schools, all employers, and I said all aspects of public life. They advocate for Twitter to ban you on your social media. They advocate for you to be banned off of your Facebook. This is just what advocates are pushing for at the moment, saying you shouldn't have to hear a voice of an alleged perpetrator. These are real examples. Finally, I think that I do think that we have an agreement. The agreement that's important is that the Me Too movement was able to actually expose people that were beyond reach from the corruption of the culture that they were in. And identifying that was the mainstay of one was beneficial.
Okay, so on the universal negative thing, or you can't prove a negative, I mean, you framed your argument in such a way that it was a negative. You said there have been false accusations. That's your claim. You have to back it up. You could have made a different argument in that respect, but I'll leave that at that. My case is very simple. I think it's necessary. You agree that it's necessary. You agree that sexual assault's underreported. You agree that victims aren't speaking out, and you agree that rapists are still on the loose. You agree. My case is secondarily that it's beneficial. You agree. It's done very, very well. It's put down all these big people, all these big moguls, Harvey Weinstein, Brett Ratner, Larry Nassar, Matt Lauer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we have nothing to disagree with on the pro side. On the flip side, though, you still have no examples of post-Me Too movement in examples where people have been falsely accused and they've been hurt by it. But even if you did, my number of examples is still outweighing yours.
Right. Okay. There's a box there. Like I was saying, I never framed that there were false rape accusations. I said it's inevitable that there are false rape accusations in an environment that does not have it's a precedent of innocence until proven guilty. This is inevitable. This is not a question of can you prove that it's happened? No, that's why the legal precedent was set in place. I said over 2,000 years ago from the Roman Republic. Undermining that has inevitable consequences that you can't see. The people that are in jail falsely in the future from this new precedent, I said, or fired falsely, or people that are just removed from school aren't going to be exposed. These are the people that are going to be victims, and there will be no recourse for these victims because with the new court of public opinion pushing this new, I said, pushing for advocating these new standards, employers, schools, and I said, and perhaps maybe the Justice Department, like I said, who already set a precedent in the past, I said, are all pushing for this new standard. Where I said the potential for having this new exposure abused is just inevitable, and it's going to be a consequence of having this debate in the future.